Welcome, everybody, to the Glamping podcast, powered by the American Glamping Association, where we speak with industry leaders, entrepreneurs from around the country and the globe, and hear stories about their business, their projects, and their journey, and the stories that help shape their success.
And honestly, it's so incredible because anything that we can do to get people outdoors is a win. And I think our culture needs it more than ever now. We need that connection to nature. And if a beautifully decorated tent is what it takes to get a family or a couple or just an individual to sleep under the stars, then it's pretty exciting.
I'm your host, Ruben Martinez, and thanks as always for joining us. On this week's episode, we speak with Natalie Binder, the founder of Camp V, a glamping operator outside of Telluride, Colorado. Located on 120 acres in southwest Colorado, this glamping property now has Airstreams, bell tents, converted cabins, primitive camping, and the land has a lot of history as well, not only in the area and the community, but for Natalie as well. In the 1940s and 50s, it was used to house employees, engineers that worked in the nearby uranium mill. And as Natalie will tell us, not only does her family have roots in this community, but also to the very property. Enjoy. Welcome, everybody. We are joined today by Natalie Binder, the co-founder of Camp V, a boutique camp that combines art, history, architecture, design, and unique spaces, about 50 miles outside of Telluride, Colorado. And we will jump into her camp, her operation, her story. But first, we'd like to actually start from the beginning. So welcome, Natalie. Thanks for taking the time for the conversation.
Thank you so much. Really happy to be here and calling in from our construction site. So don't mind any construction noises you might hear in the background.
We're eager to hear about it. But before we jump into all of that fun stuff, curious if you could just give myself and the listeners a little bit of a background of who you are, Natalie, and more specifically, where you grew up and what that was like.
So funny enough, and it's interesting, this actually didn't even really occur to me until recently, but I mean, I was born and raised in Green River, Wyoming, but the interesting part is that actually I grew up across the street from my grandparents' campground. And
your grandparents had a campground?
They did. And I started working at their campground. I must have been 14, mowing lawns, cleaning the laundry house. So that was really one of my first jobs. So, it sort of wasn't, it didn't occur to me until sort of recently, like, oh, wait, I started off at 14 working in my grandparents' campground. But yeah, so I was born and raised in Wyoming, obviously spent a lot of time outdoors, but knew that, wanted to get out and explore and travel the world. And that hospitality really was sort of that, that key to doing that, to be able to live and travel and work in different places. And so I pursued a degree in hospitality from UNLV, and then my first career was at Caesar's Palace and learned the ins and outs of running a really big hotel. Knew that was not for me. And my family had some roots in the Telluride area. So after college, went there, ran a hotel. That way I could ski, bike in the off season, and ended up sort of on the ground floor of this boutique hotel development. So that was really kind of my first taste of being on the real estate and development side. Knew that was interesting and intriguing to me. So I ended up pursuing a master's in real estate construction management at DU while that was under construction. And then came back to Telluride and actually launched my own company, which was a luxury property management company. So combining that hotel operation with the property management and the real estate side. And so this was really pre-Airbnb. VRBO had just started, and so it was so exciting to be a part of that industry, really kind of being a part of the evolution of that luxury spaces could be on platforms like Airbnb. That was, in the beginning, it was much more thought of like a hostel type, I guess, space or company. So really went through the evolution of that for about 10 years, took me all over the world, ended up opening up markets in Mexico and Spain and Switzerland and beyond. So it was really exciting to be able to pursue, that balance of traveling and working, but really in my heart. And I think this comes back to being, born and raised in Wyoming. I knew that people were looking for something more authentic, and that it was being lost a bit in the travel space. The word luxury was just being used to sort of explain everything, but like really, where was that authenticity of connection to nature and giving back and connection with community? And I knew that there was going to be an evolution with glamping, and that was sort of the combination of all of those things.
And do you feel that connection, how strong was your tie to your grandparents' campground? Because that's interesting. And many of the conversations that we have, you have operators, you have new business owners that are just new to hospitality, new to the outdoors, and have had some version of a connection to it, but not really a strong one, maybe a connection to business. Mm-hmm. So how much time did you spend at that campground? Was there a vivid memory that you have there that helped enforce this love for the outdoors and maybe shaped consciously or subconsciously your drive towards glamping?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's sort of, I had to absolutely shape, where I am today. Like I said, I don't think it's something that occurred to me until recently, but I do have these vivid memories of when I was, mowing lawns and pulling weeds, the work that it takes to take care of, of land, of meeting these people from these different places. And, one of them, I think, was selling these like glass type sculptures, like, check out what we make. And, anyway, just those random conversations. And obviously, if you're going to enter into the hospitality industry, you have to really enjoy, I think, connecting with people and having those kinds of conversations. You're drawn to it on some level. And I think probably having that energy across the street from her, it was literally across the street. So in the summertime, there was like this busy campground. My cousins and I would like wander through, and, of course, we're like, especially as a teenager, trying to meet kids and kids our age, because I grew up kind of in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming. And so, yeah, I think that absolutely there's definitely a vision that I see, with the camp that we're creating, where I'm hoping that there's going to be that teenage kid, trying to meet another teenage kid, or just, shared random conversations.
And who, at that point, when you were wandering across the street, you're exposed to this campground, there's some interesting people that are there. Who are you really at that point? Did you feel at that point you had a grasp of who you wanted to be when you were all grown up, years and years in the future? Was this something that was just something fun for you as a teenager? Or at that point in time, were you driven to be outdoorsy, knew that you wanted to travel? Was it something that was front and center in who you were, or just almost a stepping stone in this path and journey that you took in the outdoors?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I knew from a very early age that I wanted to do something interesting and that I wanted to be able to take care of myself. I think I grew up in a community where that's maybe not necessarily valued as a woman, that it's perfectly okay to go get married and a man can take care of you. And, my parents said all the time, I don't know where you came from, because I would have these conversations with them like, I'm not going to do that, and I don't want anyone to take care of me. And they were like, oh yeah, we're aware, we live with you. So I don't think that it was clear in terms of that path necessarily of hospitality at that point, and certainly not to work in a camp, because it was hard work. It was a lot of work as a teenager, but I was very close with my grandparents, and they also had me do these really funny things. And actually, we're going to replicate that into our camp, because we do have a very good art theme here. But they were obsessed with like these river rocks and putting them around the trees, and they had to be painted green. And we grew up on the Green River, and a lot of times people would throw these rocks into the river. So people thought that they were green because they came out of the Green River, but it's because I spray painted them. They had this like look that they wanted. It was a little kitschy and a little rednecky, but it was a really beautiful camp. But it was called Texas Travel Camp. And it was an old cowboy that ran it. So I spent a lot of the summer spray painting these rocks to replace the ones that had gotten thrown in the river. So certainly my idea of a camp, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that for, my career. But it was really when I moved to Telluride before college and was living in a ski town and living in an outdoor culture that it clicked with me that this is the key to be able to live in the places where you can outdoor recreate. I'm going to pursue, your options are like hospitality or real estate, or, outdoor recreation type jobs like ski patrol and whatnot. But there's limited opportunities, in ski towns, and especially then.
Yeah. At your property now, you've got Airstreams, you have bell tents, you have potentially various types of structures that you might bring in the future. And growing up across the street from your grandparents' campground, seeing traditional camping, do you remember, was there a certain point where you saw glamping for the first time, it resonated with you that this would be impactful for the travel of the future, for outdoor travel in general? Was it something that resonated with you recently, or was it something that you've seen throughout your career? Was it something that was prevalent at the grandparents' campground?
I like to think it was at their campground, but things were a little more rustic back then, which is great. It has its place for sure too. But I think that really the glamping side resonated more with me sort of later on in my career in hospitality, and you started seeing teepees, like for example, like Ralph Lauren's Ranch, which is in our backyard. They did a whole curation of teepees, and a friend of mine who's a designer curated them with antiques, a very Ralph Lauren style. And that's where some, their guests were staying when they came and visited their ranch property. And that's really, I think, when it started to resonate a little bit more with me from a design perspective, that there was this great connection that you could do with being in the outdoors, but still have some of those fun creature comforts and just, and creativity.
Would you say that that's as we fast forward, and I know we're jumping a little bit all over the place here, but it's what makes these conversations good.
Right. All over the place.
I think you resonate, you hit on something there, a driving factor of being able to get people to go outdoors. As we fast forward and as we get through your time in Telluride and the career that you had there, and as you start to think about this idea, and this idea has taken root, as that idea was starting to form, was part of it driven by this idea of getting people outdoors? Was it driven by the opportunity for you to have this career in the outdoors and do something that's your own again? Was it a, hey, I've got this idea, I think it's going to hit and I got to run with it?
Wow. Well, I mean, you hit on a lot of it. It was definitely a lot of those things, but really one of the main driving factors was, it evolved. I guess sometimes you don't know what you're really getting yourself into. But I
never know what I'm getting myself into.
Right? It's like, oh, here we are. Careful what you wish for. But no, my business partners and I. So the other co-founders are Bruce and Jody Wright from One Architects, and they have this incredible architecture firm in Telluride, and they've been doing incredible homes for over 25 years. And so collectively as a group of friends, and we'd done some other things together before, we knew we wanted to do a project together. So we had been looking for land or whatever it was to do something. And this particular property where we're at right now, which is Camp V, is Van Corum, and it's this old mining town. It's these cabins that were built in the 40s for the engineers who worked in the uranium mill, on the atomic bomb. And this was a very bustling community. Well, this is the community that my family is from. my dad's side of the family, and he was born and raised here and actually lived on this property when he was little because my grandmother worked for the Vanadium Corporation. So I was never a part of this community, but it's a big part of my family's history that I've never connected with because my parents were divorced. And so when I saw this come on the market, I was drawn to it. And sort of long story short, we ended up purchasing the property. And we knew that this community deserved a transformation. And its uranium mines closed in the 70s. Its coal power plant is getting dismantled. Now they're losing that industry. And what I realized was that it's happening to these rural communities all over the West, and they deserve to be reinvented. And we have this opportunity to do this through hospitality and outdoor recreation. And that's what I hope becomes and trails becomes a major driver for, these former mining towns. And you see it. I mean, Telluride was a former mining town. Aspen was a former mining town. Clearly very different, kinds of communities. And so really the driving factor came about really surrounding, rural economic development. And I felt like being born and raised in Wyoming, I had this unique opportunity where I can connect with this community because I understand what they've gone through and how they work and how they communicate and what they value. So it became a little bigger than just a glamping, a design project. And I think that those are the kinds of projects, though, that people are searching for. And I was searching for that. We've said all along, maybe we needed this more than needed us.
Sure. So. And take us back a little bit, that first conversation that you just mentioned with your partners. Is this something that you had been talking about with some consistency? Was it a one-time conversation over a beer, then all of a sudden the next day you guys are looking at land? What did that cadence of those conversations look like at the beginning?
Oh gosh, it involved definitely probably too many beers.
Best ideas are born that way.
So, we were together often. Now we're together 24/7. And luckily we're not sick of each other yet. But yeah, we would get together often. And a perfect example would be I'd go on some outdoor adventure like in Bluff, Utah, which I love, next to Bears Ears. And I would say, we've got to buy property there. We could do this project there. It'd be so amazing. And it kind of, it's the same thing. They'd go look at something. I would say there was at least 6 to 8 options that had been thrown out, but never anything serious where we had put in an offer or really went and looked. And I think it was because as a group, no one was ever like, it was just like, yeah, okay, let's keep talking. Let's keep talking about it. But this particular property was really different. It was like an hour from our hometown, and it had this unique story. It obviously had this family history for me. And I took Jody up here because it was pretty overwhelming in the beginning. There were tenants living here. It had been neglected. There was a junk. It was just like a junkyard. It was pretty overwhelming. And so I brought her up here and said, okay, what do you think about this? And she was like, it's amazing. We should do this. We could do this. And so it was like, okay. Like we, with her confidence, because, as an architect, right, she sees things go from nothing to something. And it's a really helpful perspective that she was like, this is easy. This can be cleaned up.
And so if we fast forward to, you guys have had several opportunities to talk about, all right, we've seen the property, we've seen the land. This is what it looks like. What was the next step? What was the first step at that point in time that really made this real for you? Because at that point, you could have just walked away. You guys could have seen the property. You guys could have had a long list of reasons not to do it that would have been reasonable, that would have made perfect sense. It's too hard. It costs too much money. We haven't done something like this as a group before. There's typically this starting line or this point where you can go a fork in the road. You can go left or you can go right. And it seems that at this point there was a fork. So what was what was the next move, or what did you do at that point that really made this real, instead of being like the many others in various industries who get to that point and then just say, hey, not now, for a host of reasons?
I think this project has been so amazing in a lot of respects, because there have been there's been actually been sort of a lot of aha moments. And so, but to sort of talk, I guess, about one of them was, while it was under contract, I did have obviously some concerns about embarking on this. And I think that, and a lot of it has to do with the history of this community. Like when people talk about a community that's losing its job base, there aren't many people that say, hey, we should go build this big project there, right?
The opposite, right? Without
I mean,
in the area.
Exactly. My own family was like, you're crazy. And they love this area. This is their hometown. They all left, though, and went and pursued other careers. And they said, I suppose you're young enough that you can take this risk, but I wouldn't do it if I were you. So anyway, it's under contract, and I'm sort of weighing all of these things. But at the same time, again, Bruce and Jody are very much like, no, it's going to be amazing. And we have this opportunity and we have this unique skill set. But you're still trying to be pragmatic about all of this, because it's a real thing. So the Telluride Foundation had started doing some programs down here because of what was going on economically. And we had a relationship with them, and someone had said, you really should talk to them about your project, because it might sort of fit in with some of the things that they're doing down there, and it'd be good for you to have an understanding. And so I had the opportunity to sit down with the president of their board, who happens to be Dan Tishman, who is the head of Tishman Spire in Manhattan. So his family built the World Trade Center and the Freedom Towers. So it was very intimidating, obviously, to sit down with someone like that and talk about this much smaller project. But he was kind enough to lend me his time, and I sat down with him and I said, I had like sort of the pitch deck, and I said, this is the idea and this is the property. And he clearly had an understanding of the area because of the work that they were doing down here for the community. And he said to me, you should absolutely pursue this. It's a great idea. I think you're going to be very successful with it. And we are here as sort of literally a foundation to help you on this journey. And I think sometimes that's the confidence you need. And I guess that would be maybe one of the biggest pieces of advice that I have, is that go seek out one of the smartest people in the industry, whatever related to, and ask their advice and opinion, because I think that they're willing to give it to you. And even though you have to have that confidence within, it's just really refreshing or reassuring to hear it from someone who's maybe done something bigger and they say, you've got a good idea.
And I think one of the most incredible parts about this story is, as we mentioned, many times when people are, doesn't matter what industry they're in, but specifically in something like this, taking on a project, they are, they're looking at a checklist of items, funding, business plan, the area, demographics, the market. Does this all come together as a whole? But you stumble upon a property that you literally have family ties to. And I imagine at that point in time, it makes that decision a little heavier, right? Where I'm a believer that often the universe can speak to us, and it's up to us whether or not we want to pay attention. Was that a point where you almost said, crap, like I have to do this now? There's almost a sign that says this is speaking to me and I can't walk away, even if I fail. And even if this doesn't get up and running, there's too much lined up right now. Did that cross your mind?
Yes, it did. And you said it really well. It's like so circular though, right? It just even goes back to then, like me saying to my friend, oh yeah, by the way, I grew up across the street from a campground. So it's the hospitality track, the real estate track, the family connection, the relationship with Bruce and Jody. And yeah, you feel really fortunate that you've had this journey, and that you find something that connects with all these different bits and pieces and brings out the best of all of those experiences. So yeah, no, it was like, how do we not do this? Like, this is a sign. Like, here you go. You better be paying attention.
And so as we look at what's happening next, as you're moments away really from opening up, and for those that are going to listen to this podcast and this interview in the future, you will be opened up, but you're essentially at that starting line, right? You've put so much work into it. Now it's about to begin. The vision that you had at the beginning, when you were starting this idea, when you had first seen the land, and when your partner said, no, we can do this, and you're starting to tell anybody and everybody about this idea, that idea that you had at that time, does that match up perfectly to what's about to open, or not?
Wow. I would say, from where I'm sitting at right now, it's bigger than that vision, and it feels like it's going to be even bigger than that. And it just really goes to show that when you do have this vision, that you should absolutely put every single idea and every single vision, even if it's not something that's going to happen, on the table, because that's really the only way that these things manifest themselves. And we did that exercise for our special use permit, because they advised us that it's a lot difficult to go back and ask to add things. So you might as well just put every single thing on there that you could ever imagine, even if it's crazy and you don't think it'll happen. And what's happening is that those things are actually happening. So those were just big ideas that we put on the table just as a placeholder. And so some of those things, though, are not we anticipate 3 to 5 years out, but a lot of those things are happening now. And it's bigger than we thought.
Good.
Saying that as we're like getting ready to open things up, like, yep, we're creating something bigger, but it's so exciting and it's so fulfilling.
For those who haven't heard of Camp V and haven't had a chance to look at your website as they're listening to this, can you just give us the quick elevator pitch of the camp, the type of accommodations, what you're hoping the visitors are going to experience when they're there?
Yeah, so it's 120 acres, located just outside of Natarita. This parcel is called Vancorum. We're lucky in that we've got about 8 acres that are down on the San Miguel River, and it's separated from these cabins, so we can really operate them as 2 different properties while the cabins are under construction. So the river parcel will have a handful of glamping tents, van spaces, camp spaces. We're repurposing some old metal buildings into showers. It's kind of some unique metal structures with hand washing stations. There'll be a camp host down there. We have this vintage bus that came with the property that'll house our boutique store. So the theme down there is really more for, more primitive camping. Like I said, mixed in with a handful of glamping tents, but it's going to have more of kind of the funky metal art sculptures. The cabin parcel, which is up above, that will open later on this fall, we'll have additional glamping tents, curated airstreams that are done by different artists, and then bigger art pieces with shared fire pits. Sorry, that's a little longer than an elevator pitch, but there's just so much to explain. So that's sort of it in a nutshell.
What's interesting with your story in this operation is that, unlike many others, or maybe like many others, I mean, every operator and every project is completely different. It's a heavy lift, and you have to take on a lot from day one. You have to do the business plan. So you as the founder have to find partners. You've got to raise money. You've got to figure out the additional operating capital. You got to talk with manufacturers. You got to purchase the land. So a lot of people who are starting these projects end up falling off for that reason, that it can be not only seem like one, but it is a heavy lift. In my perspective, I feel that maybe something along these lines has to change for more and more operators to get up and running, because you've got this great experience, you've got a great background. This is something that maybe is a slam dunk for you. Maybe obviously it was a long road and very difficult, but you were able to do it where maybe others couldn't. And so is it a fair assumption to say that through the skill set and experience that you had not only helped you, but do you feel that process is fair? Do you feel that something would have to change? Because from an outsider looking in, something, I've never started an operation before, but I often feel it's almost, I don't want to say unfair, but the odds are really stacked against you versus other business owners because of all these different hats that you have to wear, right? That we just talked about. And so for the industry to move forward and for more operators to get up and running and really match the increase in demand that we're seeing, through that process that now you're basically through the tunnel, you see the light at the other side, you've seen the start from A to Z. Is the process broken in that way? Is there something that needs to be changed or could be changed? Or do you feel that, hey, this is just the way it has to be for operations like this to get up and running? This is the only way for it to run.
Ooh, that's a tough question.
And I know that's heavy. It's a heavy question.
It's a great question, though. And certainly a lot of my background has helped to make aspects of this not necessarily easy, but accessible, because I know how to shop for a property management system, and I know what I want and what I don't want, because I've worked with a lot of them. So some of those steps that might seem a little more intimidating to someone, those, that's kind of one of the easier ones. But, there's a lot that I did not know about this project, and I'm still learning, and I still don't know. We're in the middle of installing our own our own water treatment plant. I'm having to learn, all about that system and negotiating those contracts and finding the right engineer. And so, but I think the key is that I surround myself with people that do have those answers. And I don't pretend to have all of them, and I never will. But collectively, if you surround yourself with the right mentors and the right partners and the right contractors, they will have those answers, and you're really only as good as your weakest link. So I think that if more people who want to get into this approach it from, okay, I have this skill set, because everyone's got something to bring to the table. Let me assemble a team that can fill in all of those pieces and not necessarily try to do it all. Although that's great advice for myself. I stayed up till midnight building the back end of the property management system. So I'm not great at taking that advice. However, I do surround myself for people around those bigger decisions, and I don't pretend to know it, and I can't do it all. And so that I think that it's accessible if people are willing to let go, and whether that's of some equity or of some control. And let those people who are really good at that come in and help you, because it's going to ultimately be a better project and a better experience.
What I've heard and what I know of you and this project is the identification from day one that this is going to be something bigger than just putting up a few tents. That it resonated early on that this is going to have a bigger story, that there's a responsibility to the community and the surrounding area, and that can weigh heavy. I guess two questions. What's your hope that Camp V, what kind of impact it will have into the community? And also, do you feel that without that underlying tone that you would have been, that maybe this wouldn't have happened? How heavy does that responsibility to the community weigh in some of the day-to-day decision-making that you're making?
Well, thank you, Ruben, I guess, first of all, for connecting with that need to not just put up tents. A lot of that goes back to what I said earlier about people are looking for something authentic that has a real story, that doesn't just say this is the luxury tent or a luxury room. people want to know, like, well, who are you and why are you? What is the brand behind this? And so, yeah, it's something that we take, very seriously, but it's not heavy because it just feels natural. It feels natural to want to take care of the people who come up here, to work or to stay, to connect with the community, to take care of the trails, to be good stewards of this planet. So that all feels very natural. And I think when you're operating with that authenticity, it doesn't feel heavy. It actually feels more natural and normal, because that's how we should be operating. And I think that we, at least from a business perspective, I think there's a lot of businesses that have strayed away from that for so long that it's become normalized. I do think that people are starting to think about things a little bit differently. Certainly COVID has brought people, obviously they've had to stay home. And so now as they're finally venturing out, they're staying closer to home. And they're exploring parts of their backyard that they never knew before, and they're getting to know this community. And we're seeing it happen as people from Telluride are now recreating down here. And this is a community that's been in their backyard the entire time, and they've never taken the time to stop at the store or get to know some of the people. And that's really how we're going to make big changes as a society, is instead of being so on the go and so, jetting away, that we're and that's really what glamping and camping and outdoor recreation does. It takes us a moment to slow down and really connect with where we're at. So I've really enjoyed it. And it's probably been one of my most favorite aspects, is really getting to know this particular community. And I hope that our impact on it is life-changing. I know that's big. It's a big word and a big phrase, but I do. I hope that it inspires people to start other businesses that wouldn't otherwise. I hope it inspires people to pursue a different career, to get involved in the arts, to become curious, or just to enjoy getting outside on a most basic level.
Natalie, thank you so much for taking the time to connect today. When you have a chance, please check out Camp V, opening up summer 2020, and some exciting announcements coming up after that. But Natalie, thank you so much for connecting. Wish you the best of luck, and make sure you come up for air this summer, because I'm sure you'll be nice and busy. But thanks for telling us your story, and best of luck for this season.
Oh, great, Ruben. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you thinking of us, and we appreciate all the support of the organization. It's really amazing what you are creating and connecting. And so thank you. It's so exciting to be a part of this industry, and thank you.
Again, and as always, thank you for joining us. For more information about news and events around the industry, please visit AmericanGlampingAssociation.net or contact info@AmericanGlampingAssociation.net for more information. Take care. Until next time.